Hello and welcome to Colleague 7 Sprint Review for 17.12.01. This is for the development undertaken between the 29th of November to the 12th of December. Starting with the sprint goal, and it's essentially the same as our last couple of sprints. We're focusing on continuing to enhance and refine the search based on client feedback and to complete phase 4 of the right to consent GDPR work. Looking at the high level items and to explain further, in this sprint, we've delivered the rank feature into the search. This is used when text criteria searching and will assign a score to a document based on the relevance of its contents versus the searching criteria. We've undertaken the work to complete phase 4 of the right to consent feature. This enables bulk sending on consent requests and has essentially completed the consent element of the GDPR project for Colleague 7. We have sorted an internal operational task which entailed the synchronization of our database project. This is for use when creating new Colleague 7 systems as well as being part of our future plans for the automation of upgrades. And we undertook a small list of items to help polish and refine the system based on recent go live and demo feedback. All that being said, during the course of the sprint, we were able to bring in some additional items. This was due to some of the works taking less time than anticipated. So we brought in a series of small-scale items which were lined up for future sprints. In summary, these were the option to delete saved searches, a user privilege setting on whether a user had rights to edit the new consent fields. There were further reports interface enhancements which accompany our new user activity report. We've moved the social media links out of the summary tab on candidates, contacts and company records. And we've now got an autocomplete on the company website field, which will prefix HTTP in order to ensure a valid website address has been entered. We'll now go through some quick demonstrations on the new functionality that's been added. Okay, so there's a fair few things to cover in this sprint. As mentioned on the slides before, we took on some additional bits here. So I will cover obviously what was covered in the search and also the work that was done relating to GDPR. But if we start with just the minor updates, just to quickly rattle through those ones. To begin with, if I cover the social media links and the work that was done there. Social media links isn't a unique piece of functionality that was added to Colleague. It'd been there obviously in previous versions. But the location of where you go about editing the links that are behind these icons used to be on the summary tab, and that wasn't obvious to the user, and also from a performance perspective wasn't the most ideal place for it to be. So what we've now done is put social media links so it's available from the view more menu. So if you click on that, the social media links partial view will come down. It will also be activated if there is an instance where social media hasn't been associated with the record. You can click on the grayed out icon and that again will launch the social media links partial view. In terms of how this functionality works, obviously you can see from the various different icons that they're coloured in when it has been associated with the record. So you can just click on that icon and it will launch the associated media and take you through to there. But if we're in an instance where it hasn't been associated, you can run a quick run search. And that will do a search against the media, trying to find the associated record that you're on. In this instance, we've found this one. So what I'll do is I'll just copy that URL. Add new, paste and save. And then you can see that social media has now been coloured in there. So for future reference, then you can go into this record and just click on that icon and it will take you obviously to that associated social media page. Yeah, that's the update that's been made relating to social media links. Next point to cover is on the company record. It's relating to the website address field. So off the admin tab, there's the website field here. Previously, this had this does have a validation check against the website address, so that it's expecting the website address to conform to a certain format. The only issue is, of course, that when data was being transferred into Colleague and also when people were typing in into this field, they would traditionally just put in a domain name. So they put in, Colleague Software or colleague.com, say, as an example. And that would inevitably cause the validation error message to appear against the field, asking that they filled it in properly, and that could be disrupting for the user. So what we now have is essentially when you complete a field, it will prefix the website address, and that just prevents that error message or that validation request against the field from appearing. As we deploy this as well, we'll also be doing a data tidy up. So in any instance of a field being in this website address field being incorrect from that validation perspective, it will prefix this this HTTPS option so that it completes that and makes sure that all the email addresses or website addresses, sorry, are valid. So that's the update that was made there. Okay, next point to cover relates to the margin calculator or markup calculator, depending on how you've set up the system. Just to explain what is meant by that, so against a rolling contract or contract field, you're going to have a field here to record your markup or your margin, and that's can be calculated using the calculator there. So previously the labeling in this area was confusing and muffled, in all honesty. So there was some tidy up that was just needed to get this working right. Just to go back a step, within the global settings area under within the admin area under global settings, under the section of placement, there's this option here of rate calculation method, 0 for margin or 1 for markup. So depending on that field being 1 or 0, it will specify whether or not you are basically recording a markup percentage or a margin percentage, and that obviously reflects on how you've got things set up within your business. But when using the calculator now, firstly on scrolling over, the wording isn't confusing there. The labeling will be correct based on your selection of markup or margin. When clicking on the button, you're actually scrolled up to the top of the screen. The wording, it will be the markup calculator or margin calculator, again depending on which setting you've applied. The charge and pay rate will be pre-populated, and obviously you can just hit calculate there and accept, and it will obviously record your markup against that field. So just again, these are minor UI tidy ups, but that area previously was confusing and has now been resolved. So that's the update we've made there. Okay, so next point to cover relates to the reports interface work. So reports is available off the left-hand navigation option there, and you have the option to select the reports that we are working on and deploying within this area. On the basis of the report you select, it will launch the associated criteria relating to those reports. And essentially what we've had to do is just modify, update and offer more parameter options just to accommodate the different reports that we want to apply to the system. Beyond that, there isn't really anything more for me to demonstrate. A lot of this is in the background of the workings behind the report interface, but essentially all of the different necessary fields and parameter settings that are required so that the reports function work have been implemented as part of this sprint. So for example, it's now possible to select users individually from that list, and multiple users also, just the way in which date ranging has been addressed, the ordering in which criteria settings has been addressed also, and the loading of different parameter controls and how that comes through is now just in a far stronger state. So we are ever closer to deploying the user activity report. In fact, that will probably go out over the course of the next week or so. Essentially the report interface was needed to be modified and updated before we could really launch that report without any issues associated with it. So that's been the hold up there, but we believe to now have addressed those issues. Moving on to the search and covering just a couple of features that were added as part of this sprint. We'll start with the rank feature, which was added here now. So the rank feature is an accompanying feature along with the text criteria search. So when doing text criteria searching against different searching types, namely the documentation searching, what you now have, if I hit show results there and those will pull through, is a ranking score which is offered here to give an assessment on how relevant that document is against the searching criteria that you've added. Rank is available as a column option off the options list, and essentially by having that there, the rank can be sorted by the relevance of the rec document against the candidate, and obviously you can then select that candidate and hit view text, and obviously see all the instances where the text has met the criteria of the search. So that's essentially the rank feature now added as part of the search within Colleague. There's some background updates that are being made to the way document are being searched in the handling of that, which is being covered in the next sprint, and that also has a kind of a corresponding element to this also. But in terms of the rank feature being added to 7, this is very much now been added to the search. Okay, so the next point to cover relates to the ability to delete a search result. So as hopefully you're aware, it was always possible to save a search result. So if you wanted to create a search result here and then save it, the option was always there to name the search result and then refer back to it at a later date. So as an example, you've got off the save searches here, save search, hit there, and then obviously you can type in project managers, say, as an example, and hit OK. So at any time when going to the search, you could always highlight over save searches and hit open save search, and you can click on and it will take you to this area. What you couldn't do, however, was delete any save searches, so this search list would grow and grow and grow, which is obviously something we always wanted to give you the means to maintain. So now if you want to delete a search, it works as simply as you'd expect it to, really. Essentially you tick which searches you want to delete. You can delete multiple searches or just the one. Hit delete searches, it will ask you if you want to delete the search. You hit yes, and then the search result is deleted. There is the option to obviously filter the searches by various different scopes. There's also the option to view different types as well. So recent searches are just any searches that you've run in recent history. It will always be recording the searches that you run, whether you name them or not. It's just when you name them, they're referred to as a saved search because they've been given a name associated with. So you can always refer back to recent searches in here. Also, if you sent any spec CV sends and via the workflow from the candidate record, you've got spec CV sent searches that are available within here also, and obviously you can hit all for absolutely everything. But essentially all of those fields now are the option is there to delete them if you wish. You can also view other people's searches as well, so the option is there as well to view other people's searches, and will obviously be applying user privileges relating to the deletion of searches if you wish for users to not have the rights to do that. But for the time being, it's implemented so that essentially you can delete your search results as you would want to as a user. So that's the update that's been made there. Okay, so moving on to GDPR, and this is the final element of the sprint, but it was a major part of this quarter in terms of the GDPR updates that were needed to be made to be in line with the regulation that's come into place on May 25th next year. So this is the right to consent feature, and it's essentially the final phase of that work. So just to summarise on where that work is. Against a candidate record and a contact record, you have this right to consent or GDPR consent icon, which will either indicate whether or not consent has been given or whether or not it hasn't. So on clicking on that icon, it will launch down these fields, which essentially is the crux of recording that information, and obviously histories are created on the basis of this data being populated. It will be default to no, but then obviously the dates are then filled in on the basis of the workflow being run. Just relating to these fields, one thing that was added as part of this sprint was within the admin area. If I go to user group permissions of the user group setting there, you've got an option here of edit GDPR consent. So it's possible to lock down those fields so that they can only be edited via the workflow rather than actually be manually typed into. So you've got edit GDPR consent, and obviously you can set full access or no access to the users in case you want to lock it down in that respect. But with regards to the actual workflow of populating the consent, that's obviously run from the email. You have the request GDPR consent option that's been added there. And this was all delivered as part of the last sprint. That edit right within admin wasn't, but this element within the email section was added as part of the last sprint. Essentially, when writing an email, you anytime if consent hasn't been received, you can click on this button and it will launch some text, which again is stored within the global settings area in terms of what the default text is, and then obviously it'll give them links for yes or no, confirming whether or not they give consent or they don't give consent. And based on what they select, it then pre-populates or then populates the GDPR consent given option that's in here, and the dates and times associated with that. You also get a notification as well. So from the last sprint, it was an option to do that individually, but now what you have is the option to do it from a search result. So it's possible to create a search result, highlight a group of candidates, hit email, and then obviously that request GDPR consent option is there to be clicked on. So let me just go to the search area and then we'll go through that. Okay, so I've had to prep a search result, obviously for the purposes of this demonstration, just to make sure I had all the examples covered. So if I click on example search, and that will bring through my results basically as I need them to be, just primed in that respect. And what is obviously possible to now do is you can select all of these records or select a subset of these records and email them as you always could, but this request for GDPR consent has been added. So the first point of note is obviously one recipient has been excluded from the mail shot. So that's the scenario where their mail shot status is set to none. So that functionality was always there, but we've also added the functionality so that if you were to add request GDPR to the email, if there is an existing a candidate within the result list that has already denied their consent, they will also be removed from the list of the two fields. So you've got the mail shot status check that's happening to make sure that you've got the right status allowance to be able to send them an email, and also whether or not they've actually denied consent. If they've denied consent, obviously the idea is that you've deleted their record, but in the scenario where they've denied consent and before you've had a chance to know that, you're trying to bulk send them an email, this obviously prevents that scenario from happening. So a denied consent candidate will be removed from here, and then from there onwards, you've obviously got the details populated into the email as you would expect it to, and you're able to send the email and it worked basically as it did for the individual record moving forward. So that's now in place for both individual records and for bulk sending as well, and obviously everything works as it does. So on clicking that link, obviously a notification is triggered, the record is updated, basically just everything as part of the last video that I recorded relating to the individual GDPR consent feature. But as I say, there'll be a document that's pretty much almost written at this point that will be distributed with all the functionality relating to GDPR, and there'll be further videos recorded as well as an overview. But in summary, that was the works that was done related to GDPR, and that completes the demos for this sprint. As always, if you have any queries or feedback, please get in touch. I'll be keen to hear from you. Also, for those using Colleague 7, feel free to submit your enhancement requests via the user voice integration. The next video will be the sprint plan for 17.12.02, and as always, that will contain a high-level overview on the items we intend to work on during this sprint. Thanks for watching.